What's good, people? It's about that time to randomly relate, reverse rants, no hate. So, listen, I had a conversation with a group of brothers, right? And the conversation was kind of interesting, right? So, let me share that with y'all. First off, salute my whole family. We growing, baby. The numbers are picking up. Salute everybody. Big shout out to everybody all over, wherever you from. In the comments, tell me where you from so I can shout out where you from. Big up your country, your state, you as a person, all that good stuff, man. I love everybody. Okay, here's the question of the topic of the conversation. I'm going to ask it, then I'm going to break something down, and I want to know what y'all think. We were talking about the heavyweight landscape right now. Now, personally, now everybody always have their favorites and who they think the greatest was of all time. Now, I truthfully don't really believe in greatest of all time. I really don't. And I like different fighters for different reasons a lot of times. Now, when I break it down, my comment was I think Lennox Lewis, okay, was good enough to beat anybody. Personally, that's just the way I feel. Now, we can't prove what we believe, but we look at things, and I'm being logical on my take, okay? I feel like Muhammad Ali in his prime could have beat anybody. I feel like Evander Holyfield in his prime could have gave anybody a run for their money. You know what I'm saying? Like, if not beat him. Mike, I can go on. But here's what the question was. I don't think it's fair to compare Lennox Lewis to Tyson Fury as far as legacy right now, because Tyson Fury is still fighting. Okay, he still has some years left in his sport. Lennox Lewis is retired. His legacy is already cemented. But who in their prime do you think was better? Because I look and say, okay, so let's compare them. Tyson Fury 32 now, right? So Lennox Lewis, let's compare them both at 32. Who do you think would have won between Lennox Lewis and Tyson Fury, and why? Now, here's my thing too. In my breakdown, I don't know who would have won. The night that Vladimir Klitschko fought Tyson Fury, was it a bad night? Regardless, Tyson Fury did what he had to do. Now, a lot of people wasn't impressed by his win. Because it was just a basic 1-2, 1-2. Kept it long, kept it behind the stick all night. But he won. He did what he had to do. Lennox Lewis, now he was 38 when he fought Vitaly. Okay, so what I'm saying, that's why for Lewis, we're gonna stop at 32 because Tyson Fury is only 32. But when I look at him at that stage, Vitaly, it was a great fight. A lot of people felt like Vitaly Klitschko really won the fight. But people exaggerated as far as they made it sound like Vitaly just dogged Lewis out and Lewis had no offense. No, they were cracking each other, man. It was a great fight. And that was Vitaly's coming out fight, to where he showed everybody, look, I just got in here with the heavyweight champ of the world. And the fight got stopped on the cut, which, hey, you got to protect yourself at all times. Lewis got to get his credit. He landed the shot that cut him, okay? It's not like he came to the ring bleeding. But he never gave the rematch to Vitaly. He retired. Now, I respect Lennox Lewis' career. Now, his decision to retire, I don't feel like, he retired because he was scared of Klitschko. Look, the man was 38. He did what he had to do. It may appear that way to people because the fact that they felt like he really lost the fight, so they felt like he retired because he didn't want to fight Klitschko again. I don't know what was going through his mind, so I can't say if that's true or not true, okay? I'm not going to even take it there. But between Vitaly and Vladimir is technically the better boxer. Technically the better boxing skills than Vitaly. Vitaly is more keep it long. He will just jab right hand all night long, and it's hard for opponents to get paid. They both know how to use their jab. Now we know that Vladimir his very first loss to Corey Sanders, and then he got beat by Layman Brewster, and he was gassing out. He was getting caught with shots. And when he started training with Emmanuel Stewart, you could see the transformation in him. I remember he fought Samuel Peters, and Samuel Peters kept hitting him in the back of the head and dropped him several times. But Vladimir, aside from the knockdowns, Samuel Peters wasn't able to land and really do much. And people were saying Samuel Peters really won. Now, I don't know if it's because they hated Klitschko or what. Now, personally, I don't think Samuel Peters won that fight. I don't think he won that fight. He wasn't landing much. He wasn't doing much. He was coming forward with the pressure, but he was missing mostly everything. So aside from the knockdowns, it was nothing that he did. And we know Samuel Peters can punch. Vladimir's face wasn't bruised and swollen up and all of that. So, no, he wasn't landing the punches. He was throwing a lot, but he was missing a lot. Coming in really reckless and quick. And, at this point, Vladimir is fighting. He's boxing. He's moving. And he developed into a much better fighter. Now, I consider Vladimir a late bloomer, and I consider Lennox Lewis a late bloomer. Now, it was Vitaly that he fought. I get that. I think Vitaly is tougher than Vladimir overall. Like, he has more of we gonna bang. Vitaly's more of, Vladimir's more, okay, let's box. Because we've seen that style when he gets rocked. I think Vitaly has a better chin. Not saying that Vladimir has a weak chin, because understand he got cracked by some hard shot punches. It's not like he was getting hit by guys that can't punch. So trying to compare the performances, because each Lewis and Fury both fought the brothers, the opposite, but it's like I can't really say who would have won, because truthfully, now Fury's 32, but if you watch when he fought Vladimir, Fury was a lot more elusive in that fight than he is now. A lot more mobile on his feet, a lot quicker on his feet, body movements, everything. So, in terms of his prime, he's not in his prime right now. Skill-wise, what it is, he's so skillful that he can make up for what he can't, what he used to do, that he doesn't move the way he used to. If you watch that fight with Vladimir, you see Fury was quick on his feet. His hands was even quicker than what they are now. But he's the WBC champion now. So he's the champion again. So, like I said, because he's 32, we're going to compare him and Lewis at 32. At 32 years old, do you think Tyson Fury was better than what Lennox Lewis was, or vice versa? I think it's an interesting thing, because it made me go back and start looking at some more fights. And, if I wanted to say a favorite, like I said, I think Lennox Lewis is good enough to beat any heavyweight. The guy was skilled. Over here in the States, man, let's just face it, people don't give British fighters their just due. They always overlook these guys. I felt like Evander Holyfield was the best of his era, but he lost to Lennox Lewis twice in my book. Now, Riddick Bowe can't stand Lennox Lewis, so he says Holyfield won both times, but we both know that first fight, I think the fight was closer than what people said, but no way Lennox Lewis lost that fight. They called it a draw. Second fight, he clearly won, but Holyfield held his own in both fights. He held his own, but Lennox Lewis won. And if you look at their resumes, Lewis and Holyfield, to me, had the better resumes out of all the heavyweights in that era. They fought everybody that was there that they could fight. And resume-wise, you can't compare Lennox Lewis and Tyson Fury. I just like he beat Wilder. He has to fight a AJ. He has to fight a Dillian. He has to beat these guys. And to be honest with you, the heavyweight division was not deep. The heavyweight division was it was really empty for a while. And over the past, I say 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, it started to, get more names. Because I think guys like Oscar Rivas can fight. Andy Ruiz can fight. I remember Andy Ruiz sparring with Holyfield. He was 19. Holyfield was 41. And he was giving him the business. Now, of course, Holyfield wasn't the prime Holyfield at that point, but still, he was. So Andy Ruiz could fight. And I think what happens is when fighters come from different generations, we separate them to the point that we start imagining these fighters at their best, to the point where we're saying, oh, you can't compare this guy because he hasn't done this and this and that. Now, just because the resumes don't equal up doesn't mean Fury doesn't have the ability to win and beat him. You see what I'm saying? To fight him and beat him. So I don't know, but I thought that was an interesting thing because right now, not just on British soil, man, in boxing in general, because I feel like fighters, wherever you from, you gotta. It's not just an America thing. For me, I don't feel like you got to put the American fighters first. No, you rank fighters based on their ability. That's how I've always been, and I feel like when you break these fighters down and you look at who's who right now in the heavyweights, I give the nod to Anthony Joshua, but it's going to be in my book, in my opinion, it's between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. And so when these guys finally fight, for AJ to beat him, you can't deny it. If he beats AJ, you can't deny it. That's undeniable. Who you going to say is the better fighter of this era? Who can you give it to? Now, in the long run, for them to lose to guys before they get to the point where they're starting to skills are starting to diminish and things like that, hopefully they don't stick around and go through that. It's just hard to see great fighters just end up sticking around too long and they're losing the guys that they normally would have beat. You know, but if that's the case, then you look at when they were in their primes. And I feel like because of Fury, his inactivity, not being in the sport for as long as he should have been, or the hiatus, disappearing and coming back and never defending his title. All of those things is what I'm saying. You can't compare legacy-wise him to Lennox Lewis, but I'm talking about just sheer ability. Like if they fought in their primes, who you think would win? But Tyson Fury definitely has the skill, and I don't know. I can't honestly say who I think would have won. I mean, I can look at both of them in different fights. I can say Lennox was tested more. Now, if I had to lean towards anybody, I would have to lean towards Lennox Lewis because of what he's accomplished and how he did it. And Lennox Lewis does not get the credit that he deserved. But a lot of times a fight it looks easier from the outside. But then when I start thinking, and this is how I feel, when I think about what Lennox Lewis did, I gotta go with Lennox. But I start looking at Fury's ability as well, and it's like sometimes stylistically, certain guys is just they have a certain guy's number. And when I picture the way Tyson Fury fights, it's like I don't know, man. I don't know. That's a tough one to call. And I don't think it's a right or wrong answer because it's not like we can prove it. But I can't just sit here and clearly say Lennox easy, Lennox all day. I can't just say that. But I thought it was interesting, and the conversation that we actually had was so deep, man. Because a lot of times we forget, like Lennox Lewis, man. He beat Tony Tucker. He beat Razor Ruddock. He beat Mike Tyson. He beat Holyfield. He beat Riddick Bowe in the amateurs. Jorge Gonzalez beat both of them, Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis, in the amateurs. And Riddick Bowe destroyed Gonzalez. So I wanted to see that fight in the pros between Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe. We never got that fight. He destroyed David Tua. He beat Ray Mercer. He beat Vitaly Klitschko. Lennox Lewis got some names on his resume, man. Oliver McCall, who dropped Mike Tyson in a hard sparring match. Oliver McCall was no pushover. He just was loony, man. And so Lennox Lewis beat some guys. He beat Tommy Morrison. And the thing was, when Lennox Lewis beat Frank Bruno. I mean, Lennox Lewis beat some guys, man. And I think like people forget, if you really just went back into his library and watched what Lennox performances and who he beat, Lennox Lewis does not get the credit he deserved. Tyson Fury is getting that credit now. And like I said, in the States, people just have this, I don't know what it is, man. It's like they have something against the UK. Because they'll big up certain fighters in America that's not American. But when it comes to the UK fighters, like, I mean, for example, I saw a top 10 middleweight list. And it was a deep list, and I don't feel like it's a right or wrong answer. But this list, I saw like 4 or 5 different lists, and most of the lists look identical. Right? But there was no Nigel Benn, no Chris Eubanks, no Joe Calzaghe, no Steve Collins. And I'm like, Are you serious? How could you? But it's what I'm saying. They had, and the thing was, they even had Canelo. And I'm saying, wait a minute, Canelo hasn't done enough as a middleweight to be on a pound for pound middleweight list. And when you say that, people don't understand. It's like, for example, right? That doesn't mean a guy like a guy couldn't have beat these other guys because he hasn't done enough at that weight class. What I'm saying, if you're looking at the accomplishments, I think it's unfair for a guy to fight at middleweight 3 or 4 times, and then you have a guy who spent his whole career in that division. Okay, that's why I look at it different ways. Like when people talk about prize fighting, right? I've had people say things like Manny Pacquiao was greater than Floyd Mayweather because he's won titles in more weight classes. But then they go contradict themselves and say something like Marvin Hagler, pound for pound, was greater than Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. How can you say that then when the guy only fought one weight class his whole life? He wasn't a prize fighter. He fought at one weight class. So how is it that Floyd is not Pacquiao's better than Floyd because he's won more and more weight classes, but both of them won titles in multiple weight classes. Marvin Hagler didn't. Now, if you want to compare Marvin Hagler as a middleweight, sure, but I don't feel like let's say for example, Floyd went up to 154. Now, I'm not at all saying Floyd couldn't beat the fighters at 154. No, I'm not at all saying that. What I'm saying is, pound for pound, when you're talking about 154 pounders, you can't put Floyd in that conversation in terms of pound for pound in that weight class because he only fought there, twice his whole career. Sugar Ray Leonard fought twice at middleweight. When you're talking pound for pound, you can't talk about Sugar Ray Leonard in that conversation, pound for pound middleweight. His better days is at 147. Thomas Hearns went up middleweight. Nobody talks about his middleweight wins, his cruiserweight wins. They talk about the fact he fought Marvin Hagler. He lost, but they talk about that fight. And they talk about him fighting Iran Barkley. The majority of what Thomas Hearns did that impressed most people was at 147. So, I don't feel like you can just put a guy in the conversation just because he has a good record. He's fought some great fighters. Now, like I'm saying, I think you put Floyd at 154, he does the same thing because he was just that great of a boxer. But what I'm saying is, in terms of accomplishments, no, I can't do that. And I'm talking about fighters that I really like as fighters. You see what I'm saying? So there's no bias there. I'm pretty sure y'all understand what I'm saying because there's a lot of people that don't though. They think like, oh, but this guy could have beat this guy. It's all opinions, man. Nothing. It's all opinions, But it's just like, for example, right? You got a guy got 12 albums. Every freaking album was platinum. Okay? One guy comes out and make 2 albums. They both go platinum. He's the hottest thing in music right now. And then you compare him to that guy and say, oh, he was greater than that guy. Why? Because he has 2 platinum albums and that guy has 12? You can't compare the two. You can say, I like his albums as much as I like his or more. You can say that. But in terms of a career, y'all get where I'm going. So Lennox Lewis versus Tyson Fury. And like I said, because he's 32, we're going to take it there. So let me know in the comments who y'all think was the better fighter at 32 years old. Does Lennox Lewis beat Tyson Fury? Does Tyson Fury beat Lennox Lewis? Does it go the distance or do you see a knockout? Let me know where y'all from so I can shout y'all out in the comments. Listen, never fall in love with lies. And remember, the truth brings hate out of people. And I will catch y'all on the next video.